Hey everyone, Mary at Calumet Knits, and today's video on how to put your work or your tube back on the machine. But if you're new to my channel, be sure to check it out for more knitting machine tutorials and free patterns. So whatever your reason is for wanting to put your work back on the machine, the process is the same. So let's get started. There are two ways to do a lifeline, and you can select which works best for you. In my example, I have knit too many rows and I want to remove these rows and then put the waste yarn back on. So I have found my tail and I followed this column of stitches down to the place that I want, and I'll place a stitch marker. This stitch marker is the last stitch of the row. The first method is using a piece of scrap yarn to create a lifeline. To add the lifeline, I'm going to go down one row and over one stitch to the left. This is the first stitch of the row. So using my tapestry needle and a piece of scrap yarn, I'm going to weave the yarn behind the right leg of every stitch in the row. By picking up the right leg, you will align this stitch properly for putting it back on the machine. If you pick up the left leg, your stitch will be twisted unless you go and untwist it before placing it onto the needle. So go all the way around until you reach the stitch marker. Make sure you stay in the same row. If you get off, just take it out and start again. Once you reach the stitch marker, you can remove the stitch marker and then remove the unwanted rows. You can see here that the yarn will not unravel past the point where the lifeline is. The second method is what I do, and some may think I'm a little crazy, but that's okay. I find this easier for me. Instead of using scrap yarn for the lifeline, I'm using stitch markers. The process is the same to start. Mark your spot, then go down one row and over one stitch to the left. This is your first stitch of the row. So mark the right leg of each stitch with the stitch marker. You can then go ahead and remove any unwanted yarn, and you'll see that the stitch marker won't allow the knitting to unravel past that first marker. So now we're ready to put it on the machine. On your tube, find the tail and go one stitch to the left. This is our first stitch. This will be placed on the first needle. So pick up the stitch with your loom hook and place it on the needle. Then pick up the second stitch and place that on the second needle. Now that I have two stitches on, I will go ahead and place my working yarn into the yarn guide. Make sure the tail is between the last needle and the first needle. And don't forget to reset your counter. One thing I forgot to mention is the stitches that you are placing back on the machine should be placed or pushed to the bottom of the needle so we don't get tuck stitches. Advance the machine so that the next needle is popped up and place the next stitch on the needle, pushing it to the bottom. At the same time, you also want to make sure that the new stitches are stitching properly. Just make sure the yarn is being caught by the needles and that the stitches that we're placing on the machine are not caught under the hook. Then just keep picking up stitches and placing them on the machine. Some of the stitches might be hard to find. Just take your time and be sure not to split your yarn or pick up any part of the scrap yarn. It's helpful to have a scrap yarn that is in high contrast to the color of your main yarn so that you are able to clearly identify the stitches that need to be picked up. So when using the stitch markers, I'll pick up the stitch marker that has the stitch on it. I'll pinch the stitch with my fingers, and then I'll pick up the stitch with my loom hook and place it on the needle, and make sure to push that stitch to the bottom of the needle. So continue to do this process for all of the stitches remaining. Once you have the stitches on the machine and everything looks good, I usually tuck the tails out of the way and then you're ready to go. So I backed up just a little bit and this one stitch popped off, so I'll go ahead and pop that back on, and now we're all set. So once it's off of the machine, you can go ahead and gently remove that scrap yarn or our lifeline. And you can see this is exactly what I needed to finish up this tube. So go ahead and save this video for future reference. Like and subscribe to my channel, and if you want, you can leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.